It's official. Bitcoin has just entered a new era. And I think most people are about to get caught off sides in 2026. It looks like retail is panic selling, whales are panic buying, and it's all because Bitcoin just did something it's never done before. So let's dive into all the different narratives playing out right now. It's been an interesting start of the year. We are officially bullish, pumping every single day of 2026, which isn't saying much. It's just the second day, but hey, you know, forgive me for getting bullish today. Anyways, let's start with where a lot of people are talking. There is a little bit of contention on this official or first story here. There's been this kind of recent trend, this recent conversation around whales buying Bitcoin. It does seem like retail, and not just the Bitcoiners have been around for a while, but as they were dubbed, the tourists have been selling. There's literally been no one but Bitcoiners in the Bitcoin space, I think, in 2025. Basically, what I'm saying is if you've been a Bitcoiner for more than a few years, you're probably the only one buying Bitcoin at this point. Everyone else is either completely out of the market or they just have no money. But this recent trend, which I think is some contention, but there's kind of these tweets going around. They could just be for engagement farming, but essentially the idea is that whales, usually people with about 1,000 Bitcoin or more, are accumulating Bitcoin, which is making everyone feel a little bullish. So first one here is 1,000K Bitcoin balance has changed. You can see it's starting to go up. The second one is something very similar. The realized cap for new whales, it's going parabolic. Now, where it starts to get a little interesting here is when someone else kind of dove into the data here. And, you could argue that this is kind of bearish. Maybe you could say, oh, this is just engagement baiting on Twitter. But here is, I think, what probably is going on here. And essentially, I don't know if you could say it was fully debunked, but someone looked into the numbers and they're like, look, all these whale charts right now are essentially the exchanges consolidating. And if you eliminate the exchanges consolidating, then it looks like on net, everyone is still selling Bitcoin. There's still more sellers than buyers currently in the market. And I think it's very easy to kind of talk about this because, as I've been saying, the only people in Bitcoin are people that have been in Bitcoin for a long time. And if you're in Bitcoin recently, if you're a big kind of, deep pocket person, then, you might be scared. I don't know if you guys are watching the ETF inflows, but the ETF inflows are hurting right now. I think they dropped about 420 million in the last couple of weeks. So, hey, retail coming through the ETFs, they're not so happy right now. And as everyone knows, we finally ended the year on a red year. But before I get into all that, I think this is pretty interesting. The Bitcoin long-term holders, which I think is super bullish, has finally flipped positive. So if you bought Bitcoin in the last 155 days and you held it for that time, then the long-term holder statistics are showing us, hey, we have some new people building conviction, some new people buying Bitcoin at these prices and starting to feel bullish. Now, I've been bullish for a little bit here on the show. I think I'm the last Bitcoiner that has been bullish left on YouTube. Even my partner, who's not here today, has been extremely bearish on me, and it's literally been low-key wearing on my soul here every single day, guys. It's been rough, I'm not gonna lie. But what is interesting, and I have been telling you guys, that you got to watch what's going on in the leverage. In the leverage of Bitcoin is where I think the game is being played out. And as you can see here, here's the Binance liquidation maps. There's some shorts or some longs down here in around the 88K range. Not much going on up here in the shorting range. There's been about 100 and something million. I have the official number here for you guys. 115 million Bitcoin shorts being liquidated in the last couple of hours, or rather the last day. And I think this is where the signal is really happening right now. So we are above 90K currently as the show is going on. And I think what is interesting is we've seen hundreds of millions of dollars on Bitcoin shorts being liquidated right now. And we just popped up above 90K. And it makes you wonder, is there a silent buyer currently in the market? Because there is a lot of leverage short kind of pressure right now, but someone is scooping this all up. And I don't know if you guys watched the price action this morning, but some bullish developments have happened. Let me pull this up real quick. Shouts out to my boy Ansel. He's got his own Bitcoin show. He does great work. He is noting, and I think anyone that's kind of a little bit of a TA chart boy is starting to see some bullish reversals right now. You can see he's got a trend line here on the day, but we have officially made it over the 50-day moving average. Now, obviously, TA is astrology for men. So I don't know if we can really lay our hats on this, but we are starting to see kind of a bullish reversal on Bitcoin. We have made it over the 50-day moving average. We are bubbling up 90K around right now. So in the face of all the leverage shorts that we're seeing Bitcoin pump in the face of that, which makes me believe, or rather makes me kind of speculate, that there is a buyer in the market, a big buyer in the market right now that wants to scoop up this Bitcoin under 90K, which is kind of what I've been telling you guys for the last couple of weeks. Now, obviously, I was on one hand speculating, on the other hand, kind of just making my case for where we are currently. And it's been holding up very well. I told you guys months ago when we dumped under the 80K range, or dumped down to the 80K range, that I believe the Bitcoin price is most likely going to go sideways here, that we're going to go sideways for a couple of months. And then once the accumulation happens, once the buyers, or rather the sellers, get tired and the buyers get back into position, which is kind of where we are right now, you will start to see the Bitcoin price get frothy and move upwards. Now, obviously, if you're watching the price this morning, I did pull up the 1 minute chart this morning. I was watching the 1 minute chart. So shouts out to you guys that love the 1 minute chart bit now. It was very interesting to watch what happens around that 90K range. The bears really didn't want Bitcoin to go above 90K, though we broke through that a little bit. So it's going to be very interesting to see if we continue the run where we are and we start heading upwards, which is going to be essentially a bullish reversal here, doing exactly what I said it was going to do. It dumped down to 80K, it goes sideways, and then it starts going up. Though I don't think that's telling us the whole picture here. Obviously, we all saw what happened in 2025. It wasn't the year we all thought it was going to be. In fact, it fundamentally, in my opinion, broke the 4-year cycle. It's over. Yes, you could look at what happened with Bitcoin in terms of when the halving date was. It did kind of top at exactly when we all expected it to, roughly 18 months after the halving. And then it did go down to essentially like a 30% correction. But officially, the 4-year cycle is broken. It is over. We can no longer lay our hats on the meme of 3 green years, 1 red. It's officially done. So our 4-year cycle maxis, aka Nico, look, you're going to have to readjust your narrative because the 4-year cycle meme is officially done. And I made the case that it was changing throughout the year. We got an all-time high before the halving. We didn't get a parabolic year, 18 months after the halving. And then we didn't get the 3 green, 1 red meme. It's officially over, in my opinion. Though, does that mean Bitcoin can't go down next year? Obviously, no one knows what's going on. We are literally in uncharted waters. I believe we are in a new era of Bitcoin. Ever since Larry Fink came into Bitcoin, ever since the institutions and Wall Streets came into Bitcoin, it has officially changed the trajectory of Bitcoin. This is a brand new era, in my opinion. Everything we knew about Bitcoin no longer holds like it used to. We used to know exactly what the Bitcoin price was going to do. Now, moving forward, we're going to have to kind of adjust our narratives, adjust how we view Bitcoin, adjust where we think the Bitcoin price is going. But in my opinion, again, this is all my opinion, not financial advice. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm just a guy that looks at Bitcoin. I think 2026 is going to be a great year. Anyway, Simon Dixon tweets, he goes, rip the Bitcoin 4-year cycle. It was fun. Now we have to part. In 2026, we enter a new era. Remember, only Bitcoin in self-custody is real Bitcoin, which I fully endorse this message. I've been saying this for the last 3 to 6 months. The only thing that matters is, are you acquiring more Bitcoin and are you taking that Bitcoin into self-custody? Yes, I love the idea of my purchasing power going up, but in reality, what really matters is, are you holding that Bitcoin? We all like to feel like we're a little more wealthier than we were, last year. And in some cases, you could argue that that is in fact what happened this year. Though we didn't really see a parabolic bull run, we didn't see the price action we really wanted. But if you're looking at the Bitcoin yearly lows, we're still above what we were last year or in 2024. And here you can see Bitcoin's pretty much every year has gone up on the yearly low, except for 1 year. In 2016, 366. In 2017, 788. In 2018, 3,185. In 2020 or 2019, 3.3K. 2020, 4.9. 2021, 29K. 2022, 15K. 23, 16. 24, 39. And then last year, the bottom was 76K. So if you zoom out, the Bitcoin thesis still holds up and to the right. The best store of value, the best performing asset over the last 15, 16 years. And, very fittingly, tomorrow is Bitcoin's birthday, January 3rd. So we are officially entering the 17th year of Bitcoin. And last year, I think everything changed. Like I'm saying, the institutions have fundamentally changed the course of Bitcoin up to this point, for better or worse. That's just what happened. I think looking forward into what happens in 2026 and 2027 is going to be exactly what I've been saying for the last couple of months. I've been broken record at this point, but 2025 was the fundamental year that we are going to look back on and be like, yes, everything changed in 2025. Now, if you're taking Bitcoin into self-custody, if you're still accumulating Bitcoin, even though the price has been down, you just flip your perspective and you're like, I'm getting it on discount. I think we're all going to look back at 2025 and be like, it was inevitable. We knew where it was going. It was very obvious. Now, another little kind of interesting tidbit here that kind of shows we have fundamentally entered a new era in the Bitcoin kind of perspective, point of view of where Bitcoin is going, is this funny tweet here. Shout out to Jameson Lott for the first one to point this one out. But in 2025, we got zero Bitcoin obituaries. And if you don't know what that means, essentially not one time last year did the mainstream press, the corporate press, or anyone out there write the Bitcoin is dead meme. It was a zero on the year. So very interesting now. Again, 2025 feels like the year that we have crossed the Rubicon, going into the mainstream consciousness, and no one actually believes that Bitcoin's going to zero. No one actually believes that Bitcoin isn't going to go up and to the right, go to millions of dollars plus. No one is sitting here thinking, oh yeah, this Bitcoin thing, it went to 100K, it's going to go to zero. Now, I'm sure there were some chart boys out there saying like, oh, it's going to go to 10K, 1K, all these crazy bearish predictions, but not one time in the year 2025 did we get the corporate press or any big publication say that Bitcoin died, which I think is kind of a culmination, or maybe as you guys know, I love the word zeitgeist, a full zeitgeist of where we are right now. 2025, I think, will prove to you in hindsight that Bitcoin is here. It's going to stay. I think everyone is looking at Bitcoin and realizing, yeah, it's not going away. In part, or mostly in part, because of Wall Street coming into this. If Wall Street is coming in, they want products. Yes, they're trying to tokenize everything, but it's here. It's not going away. And if you are talking to people and they're telling you, hey, Bitcoin's, it's going to go to zero, bro. Quantum computing FUD, it's going to crack Bitcoin, yada, yada, yada. I think they're all completely wrong, which just goes to show that every side of the aisle needs to update their Bitcoin perspective right now. Whether you're bullish on Bitcoin or you're bearish on Bitcoin, everyone is fundamentally in the need of updating their models of what Bitcoin is doing, where it's at right now. And I do have a good clip from Dr. Jeff Ross. Shouts out to Dr. Jeff Ross, kind of maybe mapping where we're going to go. And I'm going to play that in the numbers in a second. But I think we all fundamentally were wrong. All models were wrong. Yes, you could have caught some local tops, some local bottoms, but Bitcoin has evolved. It has grown up. Tomorrow's its 17th birthday. Wall Street got into Bitcoin 2025. No one is saying Bitcoin is dying. We're starting to see a reversal on the price itself. We're bubbling over 90K at this current moment. It's starting to look like 2026 is going to be a good year. And just to kind of end this on a little more bullish hopium vibe, shouts out to our boy Bo Hines. And I really wish Nico was here today because I could dunk on him because he really loves Bo Hines. And he just tweeted yesterday, and he actually quote tweeted this again with a rocket emoji. And he goes, anyone bearish on Bitcoin heading into 2026 is foolish, which is kind of what I didn't pull it up. What I've been saying to you guys for a minute, what I'm looking at, what you should be looking at, the macro trends, the uncertainty. It seems like all of that is being resolved. And as we saw, 2025 wasn't the year we thought it was going to be. Now, obviously, who knows what's going to happen in terms of Bitcoin price? I have no clue. But it does feel like we're not going to see another negative red year on Bitcoin. That would be fundamentally unprecedented. We are already in uncharted waters because Bitcoin had a red year. It went down, 6% last year. Even though we hit all-time high, we ended 6% lower than we started the year, which is just like, okay, if this was the bear market, if 2025 was the bear market, which a lot of people have been saying, it's the least volatile bear market we've ever had, which is extremely bullish in my opinion. If 2025 is the bear market, we were only down 6% on the year, and 2026 is going to be a bull market. We're starting the year strong. I'm not gonna lie. Hey, it's just 2 days out of 365, but we've been pumping every day in 2026, which, that's going to be a short-lived meme here. But 2025, again, if it's the bear market, it's the least volatile bear market we've ever seen. Again, you guys know me. It's optimist fields for a reason. Yes, maybe I'm wrong on the short-term perspective of where Bitcoin is going, but in the long term, we know what's going on. And I always have to look at the silver lining. 6% down last year. If we start to pump, if we see the Omega candles again for 2026, if Samson Mao comes out and starts ripping the Omega candles and we actually see one, I think 2026 is going to be a very, very good year. A lot of the macroeconomic factors, which were headwinds in 2025, are starting to become tailwinds for 2026. And I don't know if you guys notice, I will cover it later, but the Fed is injecting liquidity. It looks like QT officially over. Most economies, Western economies, and even some Eastern economies are injecting liquidity. They have to print. Again, they can't stop this train. The narratives around Bitcoin on the long term are always the same. They have to inject liquidity into the system. Fiat currencies this year, if you're looking at the Dixie chart, the dollar lost about 10% of purchasing power this year. Yes, Bitcoin was down 6% this year. So, in relative terms, Bitcoin, I think, held on very strong, though it didn't feel that good all year long. When you see gold pumping, you saw silver pumping, you saw the S&P 500 pumping, NASDAQ was pumping. Basically everything but Bitcoin pumped in the year 2025. And I fundamentally think it's because the new players in the market, aka Wall Street, the Larry Finks, the Jamie Dimons of the world, they wanted to get themselves a good position. And if they've entered a market at 100K, they got a 30% discount. To them, that's a good trade. And then at literally, if I'm looking forward, if I'm correct on this, and this was the bottom, the formation of a bottom here, they launched all of their Bitcoin products at the absolute bottom of 2025. And then they're going to ride it in 2026. So I'm starting to look at the price, especially now that we made it over 90K. I think, there's been some trading TA stuff that I saw this morning saying 92K Adam and Eve pattern, which I don't even know what that fully means. I'm not a trader like that. I don't really look at TA. I just kind of troll you guys with the 1 minute chart because I think it's fun to watch. You can see in real time the bears and the bulls, but it's hard not to feel bullish right now, guys. Look, I'm as transparent a YouTuber as possible. You guys know me. If you've met me offline, I'm the same person that I am on this show. I am constantly bullish. Yes, there's some times when the price action starts to mess with me, But I think 2026 is going to be a great year, guys. I fundamentally believe this is a new era for Bitcoin. Everything's changed. All the models we've been kind of hanging our hats on are fundamentally broken. We don't know what's happening currently, but I can tell you one thing. I can point at the chart and tell you one thing. There are some very big silent buyers right now that are battling the bears. And if they can get the run, if the bulls can get back in control and we get a good run from here, I think it's going to be a great 2026, my boys. I think we're here. I think 2026 is going to be our years. Though there are some, I'm not going to be completely bullish on everything going on. There are some macro uncertainties that can potentially, hurt Bitcoin, specifically kind of the big black swan event that a lot of people are saying. It's like, look, if we enter something worse than a recession, than Bitcoin currently being treated as a risk on kind of investment, it could obviously be hurt. Bitcoin is the most liquid saleable asset in the world, and it is currently being treated like a risk on asset. So if the macro factors don't maintain bullishness throughout 2026, then we could be in uncharted waters to the downside. If the macro factors do switch to our tailwinds in our favor, then 2026 could finally be the year that everyone's been saying 2025 was going to be, because everyone kind of was laying their hats on, oh, gold's running. If only a little bit of that got into Bitcoin, then Bitcoin's at 400 plus K. Same thing happened to silver. Bitcoin really didn't do anything. But as we've seen, again, maybe the only last historical meme we have left is that Bitcoin always runs after gold runs. There is a time delay. So Bitcoin finally starts making its run. It's going to be harder and higher and faster than gold was. And I think once the FOMO comes back in is when things are going to get crazy. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the business cycle. Well, if you're looking at the business cycle right now, it is starting to look extremely bullish in favor of Bitcoin. Now, obviously, I think that meme is still not fully tested. Yes, you can back test it. Hindsight's 2020. But I believe it was this morning that someone posted the bull cycle chart, and they're like, we got a golden cross on the bull market. Bitcoin's absolutely bottom. It's going to rip. I saw some good hopium saying if history repeats, it's like 400K in play. Look, I'm just trying to get to 100K again. I'm just trying to get to all-time high here. So I'm not going to get extremely bullish and start making crazy price predictions, but I am tentatively very bullish on Bitcoin making a climb back up to all-time highs, start to break 100K. If we can maintain this current price action the next couple of days and we go past like 92, 93K, we'll start to make a run to 100K. I think we're in play, boys. I think we are in play here. So it looks like all our memes are dreams now, because they're all broken. They were actually nightmares at this point. But 4-year cycle, in my opinion, and maybe you guys can let me know in the chat if you believe the 4-year cycle is broken. Now, what I find the most interesting is when you talk to Bitcoiners, we all understand the 4-year cycle. But when you talk to anyone outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem, the 4-year cycle does not even register. They don't understand what that means. And I think as we've been talking about it all year long, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy here. Everyone was expecting the 4-year cycle, so we got a lot of selling around the top. But what I think few people expected was this unlimited bid holding Bitcoin up at 80K. I think if we saw the 4-year cycle play out exactly as we all thought, then we probably would have saw a bigger drop. And we wouldn't be seeing Bitcoin cross the 50-day moving average. We wouldn't see Bitcoin kind of pumping back up over 90K. So I think my thesis is still correct, guys. We're going to go sideways. We have just finished the sideways. Now it's time to make a climb. Now, obviously, this is not financial advice. I'm just a YouTuber. I'm just telling you what I think is going on, and I don't do this just for the views. This is literally what I think is going on. I think the institutions have fundamentally changed the course of where Bitcoin is going in the short term. because it's not playing out how we thought it was, which just goes to show you that the interest for Bitcoin right now is just starting to heat up. The institutions are just barely dipping their toes in the market, and you can see how much they're able to kind of, force volatility in the market. Though, again, in hindsight, on another side, this is the least volatile bear market we've ever seen. It's extremely bullish scenario, I think, going into the rest of 2026. But hey, we're at the very beginning of this year, so we'll have some time. I'll have some time to eat some crow here. I'll have some time to look back and be like, yeah, maybe I was a little too bullish on the first episode back into 2026, but I think this is our year, guys. I think this is our year. Hold me to it. Troll me all you want. I think things have changed fundamentally in terms of where Bitcoin is going in the short term. But in the long term, I think we know exactly what's going to happen. I think we are very, very solidly in the then they fight you stage. They are doing whatever they can to try to fight Bitcoin. I think that's only going to ramp up. Let's not get complacent here for 2026. I think that's going to be kind of my motto for the year is don't get complacent here. Make sure you're stacking. Make sure you're saving sats. Make sure you're securing that Bitcoin. That's the only thing that matters. This is, never doom 2026. Don't get complacent. We are going to win big in 2026, guys. So that's what that's kind of what I'm watching right now. Are we entering the expansion phase for Bitcoin? Are we leaving the contraction, bear market consolidation? Only time will tell. We'll see what happens over the weekend. Though the 10 a.m. kind of dumps are still happening. The BARTs are happening. It's crazy out there in the Bitcoin chart right now. If you guys are watching the 1 minute chart, the hour chart, it's crazy out there, guys. The volatility in the short-term time frames are absolutely insane. I would not want to be trading right now. This is why we just stack sats and chill. Just take that Bitcoin in the cold storage. This is the best way. Never go full 25. Yeah, that's the truth. That's so true. So true. All right, guys. So, as I said, I got a clip from Dr. Jeff Ross kind of giving his new map of what he think is going on, for the next 5, 10, 20 years from now. And then we got an interesting news, which isn't necessarily Bitcoin related, but we got some interesting news coming out of Greece. And we all know what happened in the great financial crisis. We all know when Greek, they got bailed out. Well, it looks like, some smart financial planning's coming out of there, which is in stark contrast to what we're seeing out of the U.S. So I think there's a lesson to be learned from this, okay? And then I got an interesting post for the culture to kind of, we recapped all of 2025 on Wednesday. And I got this kind of infographic of what the biggest kind of media trends were for 2025 around Bitcoin. And it might surprise you guys. And I think it really goes into this idea of we are all in the Bitcoin echo chamber. What the normies look for on Twitter, what the average, non-Bitcoiner is hearing, it's not what you see on Bitcoin Twitter. So that's the layout for today's show. I will be back after a quick commercial break. So give me 1 minute and we will continue on today's episode.
Today's episode is brought to you by Bitcoin Well Infinite. If you're a serious Bitcoin buyer, you've probably hit the same wall. Most platforms make you give up custody just to play by the rules. Bitcoin Well Infinite fixes that. They're North America's only publicly traded, non-custodial OTC desk listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, which means transparent operations and zero counterparty risk.
You buy Bitcoin, you take immediate control, period. For trades over $50,000, you get a dedicated executive Bitcoin advisor, competitive spread starting at 1%, and immediate delivery straight to your own wallet. No custody risk, no withdrawal fees, just institutional grade execution with full asset control. If you want to buy Bitcoin the right way, book a free consultation at bitcoinwell.com/OTC or email infinite@bitcoinwell.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, StampSeed. Is your Bitcoin in cold storage really secure? Are your seed phrases really secure? StampSeed's do-it-yourself kit has everything you'll need for you to hammer your seed words into commercial-grade titanium plates instead of just writing them down on paper. Paper is fragile. Titanium plates are strong. Your words are actually stamped into the titanium plate with this hammer and these letter stamping tools. Once the words are in, they aren't going anywhere. No risk of the plate breaking apart and pieces falling everywhere. Titanium stamp seeds will survive nearly triple the heat produced by a house fire. They're also crush-proof, waterproof, non-corrosive, and time-proof. And now you can customize your titanium seed plates. You can upload your design or logo and they will laser engrave it on the back of your seed plate, the opposite side of where the words are. Stamp your seed on Stampseed and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the Stampseed.com store.
Alrighty then, boys and girls. So the current Bitcoin price is 90,260. Some life back in it, boys. There's some life back in the market, which is currently a 28.5% discount from all-time high. The market cap, we're inching back towards 2 trillion, is currently at 1.8 trillion. And the block height, the only time that matters, TikTok next block, 930,600. 930,600. Dude, I always mess that up. All right, anyways. Jeff Ross was just on What Bitcoin Did. Great clip. Shouts out to Morpheus for clipping this, our boy on the Twitter team. But he's got I think a very interesting narrative here. And I think Dr. Jeff Ross has been just like me. We were very confident in the beginning of the year of what Bitcoin was going to do. But then as the year kind of progressed, you do have to update kind of what's going on, your mental models of what's going on. And I think seeing him kind of evolve throughout the year is very interesting. So here's his most recent take of what he thinks is happening, what he thinks is going to happen in the next couple of years, which I think is a great framework. I'm literally said the same thing on the Wednesday show, that we are in this for a multi-generational struggle. Now, I know that sounds a little a little rhetorical, a little propaganda-y, but as I've been telling you, I think you need to lock in. It's not about what happens next year, the next 2-5 years. It's what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years, because I think that's when we're going to really see the fundamental impact of Bitcoin. So here's Jeff Ross. I'll come back and I'll chat about it.
Deflation is incompatible with the credit-based fiat monetary system. So if it takes hold and continues, I actually think that's the end of that government's fiat currency. So I would keep a close eye on China, and as they continue to accelerate their robotics and manufacturing and AI, I think that deflation is going to get so bad that I don't know, it might be the end of their currency, and I think that's why they're stockpiling gold. And I think Bitcoin will do well too, but they obviously don't like Bitcoin because it's, they can't control it. They can't fence it in as much. I think we're going to see fiat currencies really struggle in the next 10 years or so. What does that mean for Bitcoin? I think we're going to see at some point, probably if we get that massive, deflationary event, it's hard to know because historically speaking, when we have deflation, at least here in the US, that's actually been negative for the price of Bitcoin in dollar terms. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know how to think about that because I think the only thing that survives are, actually sound money, are gold and Bitcoin. But you don't get those huge price spikes. I think what you just get is you have Weimar Germany type movements in fiat currency. So you'll see that in the price of Bitcoin and the price of gold as well. And then the fiat currency will just die at that point. And then the only thing left standing will be these sound monies. It's really hard to predict, though, what that means going forward. I think just at the other side of that, the world is priced in Bitcoin. And that kind of fits with my theory, what I've been talking about for a while now, is the multi-decade approach. So the 2010s was the collectible phase for Bitcoin. The 2020s, which we're in now, is the store of value phase. Then comes the medium of exchange in the 2030s. And by the 2040s, I think Bitcoin is the world's unit of account. And I think everything is, and you don't even think about Bitcoin in dollar terms or fiat currency terms anymore. It's just the world is priced in Bitcoin at that point. So like, Saylor's projections of whatever 21 million by 2045 or whatever his things are, I don't think there'll even be the dollars around necessarily to think like that anymore. I think the world will just be priced in Bitcoin. And so the way I look at it is how much will like a New York strip steak cost in sats at that point?
How much will my ribeyes be in sats in the 10, 20 years? All right, the first thing that popped out when I was like kind of prepping for the show is it's so obvious to me on this side of being a Bitcoiner, just like Bitcoiners are living in the future. You guys yell at me constantly about like, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. You guys are fiat maxis because you are always talking about the price of Bitcoin in fiat dollars. And like, you can't even price Bitcoin with something that they can print till infinity. And I'm like, yeah, dude, I get all of that, bro. Like I'm 100% on board with you. But where we currently are, the best metric to understand the value of Bitcoin is in fiat currencies, for better or worse. That's that's where we are. As I've joked with a few of you guys in the chat, it's like, okay, then what do we price Bitcoin in? Like one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin doesn't mean anything to a normal person. It's like, do we price Bitcoin in, jars of mayo or like, pounds of steak you can buy? Like what do we do here, guys? Are we kind of using our own mental models to go back to bartering because fiat dollars are trash? It's like, no. That's the easiest metric for value that most people understand is in fiat dollars. But I do fundamentally agree with Dr. Jeff Ross on this, that in a long enough time frame, 10, 20 years from now, I do also believe that Bitcoin will be the world's metric for value. It will be what we price the world in. I always talk about the petrosat. Once we get Bitcoin, or rather oil priced in Bitcoin, that's when we can fundamentally start to shift the unit of account for the world. We're not there yet. You're starting to see some inklings of this, but we're not there yet. But as Jeff Ross was saying, when we start pricing our steaks and sats, we really won. Now, the other interesting part about what he said, and really why I wanted to bring this up, is because, as I keep saying, this is a generational thing. Like, we're going to be doing this for the next at least 10 to 20 years. And if you aren't ready to do this for the next foreseeable future, for the, basically the rest of my adult life, like, what are you doing here? This is a revolution. This is a generational revolution. Though I do like his framing here, and he's not the first person to say this, but when you kind of look at that model, it really kind of, alleviates your time frames, your perspectives. You're like, okay, that makes sense. First 10 years was collectible. The next 10 years where we're right smack dab in the middle of is store of value, and then medium exchange. And I know eventually world reserve currency. And in the last couple of years, there has been a big push for medium exchange on Bitcoin. It's like, you need to use Bitcoin. Like, you need to buy things with Bitcoin. We need more merchants buying Bitcoin. And while I do agree with the fundamental kind of message, we need it to store value. Hence why we constantly tell you guys, or I constantly say, that I think number go up in the short term is the most important thing about Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin has to go up for it to succeed, for it to do what we want it to do. It has to. If Bitcoin just goes sideways forever, I've heard a lot of people say like, oh, dude, Bitcoin can go sideways at 100K forever. And it's like, no, it can't. If it does that and they print more dollars, Bitcoin isn't even keeping up with inflation. So it has to go up. It needs to succeed the store of value phase. And yes, Bitcoin does all of the, various characteristics of money, medium of exchange, store of value, unit of account. It does all that at the same time. Some of us are already on Bitcoin. Some of it's already are, zero fiat. Bitcoin's our unit of account. We think in sats, one Bitcoin equals one Bitcoin. Like, some of us are already living in the future, but the world hasn't caught up to that yet. And in the meantime, for better or worse, we do have to deal with the fiat system to survive. Unless you're one of those Bitcoiners that, can use Bitcoin to pay their bills, their rent, their groceries, everything they want to do. If you are in a community that allows you to function and thrive on a Bitcoin standard, then you are really living in the future. But most of us are kind of, fully in Bitcoin, but we still have to deal with the fiat world. And as we're seeing, this is starting to evolve. There's become a lot of Bitcoin products that you can now kind of, use your Bitcoin in a way that you don't have to completely get wrecked by the fiat system. But we're still very early in this process. So I think for this today, obviously great framework by Dr. Jeff Ross, but looking into what's going to happen in 2026, it's kind of one of those years where it's like, all right, look, whatever happens this year, maybe I got caught up in all the fervor and all the different narratives, which I am going to cover the main narratives for 2025 in a bit. I got to remember what I'm doing here. I got to remember this is a long-term generational decade thing. This is a decade, 2-3 decades of us needing to be here every single day, updating our mental models, continuing to stack, continuing to get more people that are loosely aligned with our perspectives to start to save in Bitcoin. You need to save in Bitcoin. It is very simple. Actually, I was having this conversation with Luke, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but we were having this conversation this morning, kind of updating the fourth turning model. And I've been saying, and you guys know, I've been talking about this constantly, where like, if you're a Bitcoiner in 2025, yeah, we didn't see, the parabolic purchasing power gains we wanted, but I'm guessing you weren't really struggling. I'm guessing if you were saving in Bitcoin, maybe mentally you felt the pain, but when it came to your financial health, I don't think you were struggling like a lot of people that are still completely locked into the fiat system. And I think if you look at this from that perspective, what did we see all of 2025? It seemed like the fiat world, like the average person, the normie, not a Bitcoiner, is finally waking up to everything. They're in that initial stage of waking up and realizing they got handed a bad hand. But Bitcoiners, we've understood this for a long time. 2025 for us was more of like, see, I told you so. I told you that this was going on. And so we are seeing like a fork in the road right now. You're either a Bitcoiner, a sovereign individual, getting your information not from the corporate press, and maybe you're not necessarily thriving on the rocket ship, but you can start to see it's breaking away. You're starting to see the fruits of your labor. You're starting to see, hey, my life is getting better while everyone around me is getting worse, while they're getting more upset. They're getting more flustered. They want to protest. They're angry about these institutions. They're angry about the fraud and the corruption. Us Bitcoiners are sitting here like, yeah, I've literally been telling you guys this for years. This is why I became a Bitcoiner in the first place. And so it does seem like there is a fork in the road right now. You're either a Bitcoiner, you're either doing the research for yourself, you're either looking at alternative news, you're, really trying to opt out of the fiat system, you're trying to deleverage yourself from the fiat system as much as possible, or you're just on the nosedive with the fiat currencies. You're just like, hey, buckle up, the plane is crashing type stuff. You're angry, but you don't know that there's a solution, which is one of my favorite things to say. Like, most people just don't understand that Bitcoin is the solution to their problem. It seems too simple. It seems almost naive when you're like, hey, look, your life sucks. I get it. You can't pay your rent. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You're you're doing payment plans on your burrito, bro, but you should really be buying Bitcoin. And they're like, bro, I can't even survive right now. I have no excess. And my heart really goes out to everyone. I'm like, man, I was even thinking this morning and last night, I'm like, okay, how can I cut back on my expenses so that I can stack more Bitcoin than I did last year? And I'm like, oh, I could cut down on here and here. I was literally thinking of that last night. I'm like, oh, I could cut down here, here, and here and stack more Bitcoin and I'll be better off in the future. But most people won't even consider that idea. They're like, nah, those Bitcoiners are dumb. There's much bigger problems. Fixing the money is not going to fix the world. And from our perspective, it's like, look, it's not going to fix everything in the world. But our main problem right now, or rather, the source, the root of all of our problems comes from the fact that they can have the unlimited money printer just print up money, magically make dollars appear and then start throwing that at all this stuff that we do not like, that doesn't benefit us, that is completely detached from reality. It's really a simple choice. You either start saving in Bitcoin Your life is going to steadily improve, or you go down, metaphorically down with the ship on fiat. They're telling us what's going on. Again, your purchasing power, if you are a dollar maxi, fiat cash maxi, you've lost 10% of your purchasing power. That means your life just got 10% harder, in my opinion. Your expenses just got 10% more. You need to save in something that they cannot print. Whether that means you're buying gold or silver, I mean, technically, you can always find some more gold and silver. As long as you're in sound money, or at the very least, as long as you're in assets at this point, you know, you're starting to move in the right direction. But the end goal, the end game is always ending up in Bitcoin. Full stop. Once you get your dollars, your hard-earned labor, your hard-earned time into Bitcoin, you can finally chill at the end of the finish line and be like, oh, all right, you know, panic averted. I'm safe. Everything is good. I think that's how most of us Bitcoiners look at this game. You don't feel safe until it's in Bitcoin. Or further, you don't feel safe until it's in Bitcoin in cold storage, and you get that notification that, okay, my Bitcoin has confirmed it's real Bitcoin. I'm chilling. It's just a mental switch going on. And I think more people are primed to make that mental shift because of what we saw in 2025. Now, they're going to be upset. You know, there's going to be some pain. There's going to be some crying. You know, they're going to fight you. But it's our time. It's our time to show people why Bitcoin was created, why they need to save in Bitcoin, how this will improve their life. It's not so much about the monetary history. It's not so much about the technicals. It's about, hey, use this thing to live a better life. That's the sell. Because I think we're starting to see Bitcoiners are doing very well. Yes, we didn't have the best year ever, but we're not panicking here. You know, we're not really struggling. We're kind of just chilling. All right, guys, I do want to cover this Greece story. It's a little different than what I normally do, but it's almost like the world is healing a little bit. It's almost like it's healing. All right. Anyways, I'll be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, Ledin, the leader in Bitcoin-backed loans. Unlock the liquidity in your Bitcoin without having to sell your Bitcoin. They've issued $9 billion in loans to over 10,000 customers since 2018. I absolutely love these guys. Not only do I have an account with them, but I also have a loan. And what I love about them is that there are no monthly payments, and you could pay back the loan at any time. As soon as you send your Bitcoin as collateral, you'll have cash in your account within 24 hours. Over 1,000 five-star customer reviews, and they've never lost a single dollar or sat of customer money. Go to learn.ledin.io/simply today, and you'll get 0.25% off your first loan. I want to give a shout out to our partner, sat123.com. Sovereignty isn't just about your money. It's about your communications too. When the grid goes down, most people go dark. Cell towers fail in hurricanes, cyber attacks, and blackouts. But satellite phones? They don't rely on local infrastructure. Iridium has 77 satellites in orbit, giving you a direct line anywhere in the US, even offshore. If you hold your own Bitcoin keys, you should hold your own comms too. Sat123.com also has everything you need to start building your Bitcoin citadel. Starlink, battery backups, Faraday bags to protect your hardware wallets, and much, much more. It's a one-stop shop for anyone serious about resilience and off-grid independence. Stay connected, stay independent, stay sovereign. Go to sat123.com/simply today and use promo code SIMPLY to get 15% off anything on the store.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, BitKey. If you already self-custody your Bitcoin, you know the deal with hardware wallets by now. Complex setups, clumsy interfaces, and a seed phrase that can be lost, stolen, or forgotten. BitKey fixes that. BitKey is a multi-sig hardware wallet built by the team behind Square and Cash App. It packs a cryptographic recovery system and built-in inheritance feature into an intuitive, easy-to-use wallet with no seed phrase to sweat over. It's simple, secure, self-custody without the stress. Time named BitKey one of the best inventions of 2024. Get 20% off at bitkey.world. That's BITKEY.world with the code SIMPLY.
Alrighty then, boys. Mainly boys and some girls. Here is this story. So this actually came out a couple of days ago. On obviously, because it's not necessarily Bitcoin related, that it kind of slipped under my radar. But I think it's a strategy of what they're doing that when you compare it to what the US is doing is very interesting. So, Greece pays EU creditors ahead of schedule to boost market confidence. Very interesting from a financial stability standpoint. So, Greece's early repayments of its first bailout loans underscores an important turnaround, cutting future interest costs and accelerating debt reduction as the country seeks to strengthen market confidence. So, of course, if you weren't sleeping under a rock, I think everyone is vaguely familiar with the Greek economy blowing up. You know, they got bailed out. It was the start of all the pain we felt when I became an adult around 2008. Well, you know, they took a lot of loans out, and now they are paying their debt back ahead of schedule, literally by years. And I think the big takeaway here, and actually shouts out to Jack Cruz for kind of pointing it out. He's like, the lesson for 2026 is do what Greece is doing, which is eliminate your debt and pay off what you have outstanding, because you don't want to get into a position right now where you have outstanding debt. So Greece completed an early repayment of 5.3 billion euro in loans from its first Eurozone bailout program this week. The settlement of the debt, originally scheduled to mature after 2031 or even into the 2040s, marks a positive step in Greece's decades-long effort to stabilize its public finances. Of course, in 2010, they blew up. A global thing for us. So Greece lost access to financial markets in 2010, and the loan facility prevented the country from defaulting immediately, limiting risk to other EU members. Between late 2009 and 2018, Greece suffered a severe sovereign debt crisis triggered by years of fiscal mismanagement, large deficits, and weak economic competitiveness. The crisis necessitated 3 international bailouts, and Greece's bailouts unfolded in phases. They're no longer active in the lending facility, but as you can see now, since 2023, Greece has restored investment-grade credit ratings for major agencies, reflecting improved fiscal performance and institutional stability. In turn, this has helped to push down borrowing costs. And then there's, of course, debate over whether this is a smart move. Obviously, the Keynesians out there are like, they should have invested that money instead of repaying. They're losing out on stuff from the government's perspective. They're like, look, we paid 5.3 billion off euros of loans, which means we've cut about $1.3 billion of loan interest. It seems like a smart move. Now, obviously, not necessarily putting it in Bitcoin terms yet, but we did see some very interesting stuff come out of the Fed, which I would argue is the complete opposite angle here. So Greece, of course, was one of the epicenters of the last financial crisis in 2010. Obviously, 2008 to 2010 is where things got very rocky. They had to take a loan out because of their financial mismanagement. Well, it looks like now they're flipping the script here. Instead of continuing down the Keynesian, just take out as much debt as possible, print the money, like just inflate your debt away. They're doing the opposite. They're like, look, I'm tired of paying debt. I'm tired of these interest payments. I'm going to start paying this off ahead of schedule by 5 or 6 years, maybe 4 or 5 years, which you could argue is completely 180 away from financial mismanagement. Excuse me. It is, very prudent financial management, which I think is kind of the lesson here, the kind of takeaway from what is going on. I don't think currently on a personal individual level that you should be over leveraging yourself, taking out more debt than you need to. Yes, they're going to inflate the debt away, but personally, you're probably not where you want to be, especially when you start to consider that the U.S. is doing the complete opposite. We saw Japan kind of shift their perspective from, the risk-free lender of the world to now, oh, shit, we have to raise interest rates. We're going to inject liquidity. So one of my favorite kind of conspiracy theories or tinfoil hats or kind of Bitcoin lore is the idea that the reason Satoshi Nakamoto picked the name Satoshi Nakamoto as his pseudonym to create Bitcoin under was because it was kind of a nod to the US or to the Western world and be like, if you don't figure out your debt problem, your money printing problem, you will become Japan. Of course, that was 17 years ago, and Japan has been able to be running running on fumes for the last 17 years, but the shit has finally hit the fan, and that's what we saw happen in 2025. Now, part of that kind of lore was, hey, if the U.S. doesn't figure out its spending problem, it will become Japan. Well, Japan just hit that wall. Now, does that mean the U.S. will have 17 years to figure it out? Or because everything is more intertwined, that it might unravel a lot faster? That's really the big question here in the global markets is, can they paper over the fundamental cracks in the fiat system? And we are starting to see those cracks happen because over the weekend, we saw that the Fed injected, 74 billion into the overnight repurchase agreements, which in context, if you look back here, isn't as crazy as what we saw in 2020 with, $152 billion, but it is kind of the start of right before 2020, when, of course, we got locked down. They had to print an obscene amount of money. This, I think, is a precursor of where we are going. So look, if 2026 kind of plays out like we've seen in the past, and this just got in the buzzer, and 2025 was a 2019 year, or a corollary to the 2019 year, does this mean that 2026 is when things get really crazy and the liquidity just gets turned on? I do want to look at the M2. I'm going to look at it live with you guys because I forgot to pull this up this morning. Let's see. We'll do the M2 for the United States. 10-year here. Let me, is this up? Do I have the right one up? We do. Okay. So you can see, here is 2008 financial crisis. Didn't do too much, right? And then, this one's the old one. This one ended in 27. This one ended when things actually got interesting. We'll go to this one. Okay, so here we are. Max, let's go max. So you can see all the inflection points. 2001, the dot-com bubble. 2008, the great financial crisis. This little hockey stick sliver is 2020. And again, we are at all-time highs for the M2 liquidity right now. So look, I think it's becoming very clear. They cannot stop this trend. The liquidity is coming back on board. Now, does that necessarily mean it's going to end up in Bitcoin right away? No, I don't think so. But what we are seeing in the repo markets right now is the Fed is injecting liquidity into it. They have to inject liquidity into it. And then if you really kind of combine that with what's going on in the silver markets, it looks like they're trying to crush silver. So as the rumors have been the last couple of days, it seems like there might have been some very big banks on the wrong side of silver shorts, and they had to inject liquidity to kind of, silently bail them out. Now, we won't know if that is the case. They're obviously, I don't think we'll go bankrupt, but I do think they'll probably get rolled into like JP Morgan or something like that. The big banks will get rolled into the even bigger banks. So very interesting stuff going on in the more TradFi markets right now, which I think is really kind of showing you the dichotomy here. We have Greece, which was they probably learned their lessons from the last time that they caused the great financial crisis, or was rather blown up around that time. They're starting to make smarter financial moves. And here in the US and in Japan, I guess Japan's starting to wake up and they're making better moves. You could argue maybe they're not, depending on your view, but I think you should be starting to ask the question, will the Federal Reserve start to make smarter moves? And how do you position yourself for that? And how do you position yourself for the opposite of them not making smarter moves and continuing down the same path that they've been on? Obviously, I think from our perspective, The solution is very simple. You start to save in something that they cannot print, which is, of course, Bitcoin. You need to start saving in Bitcoin like your life depends on it. I know that's hyperbolic, but it's true. You need sound money. That's the full stop of this. And I think Bitcoin's the best money. I think Bitcoin's going to take over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I think it's Bitcoin's time to shine. Yes, 2025 was our lost year. Wasn't what we thought it was going to be. It was a transitional year. Things were changing, but now we are in a new era where I think Bitcoin will start to see its star rising. It's going to take its spot as the best money moving forward from here on out. First, we got to dethrone gold, and then we're going for the rest of it, baby. And then we're going for the rest of the market. So that's kind of my views on what we're going on right now. And then right now, to end the show, I do want to kind of go back and look at all the different trends for 2025. And there is some takeaways for this for us Bitcoiners that are perpetually online. But one last commercial break, and I will be right back.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, HIVE Digital Technologies. Fueled by clean energy, HIVE has quadrupled its global Bitcoin mining footprint and channels that same scale into high-performance compute, where their AI cloud is now ranked #1 in the world for network performance. At HIVE, you've got dual engines, Bitcoin and AI humming, roaring, accelerating in unison. They're lean and mean, they're green and clean, and they're rewriting the playbook on sustainable digital infrastructure. You can catch the latest buzz at HIVE Digital Tech or at hivedigitaltech.com.
I want to give a shout out to our partner, bitcoinben.io. If you're into freedom, Bitcoin, and building a real community, this is for you. Gain exclusive access to real-world, members-only, private clubs across the globe, featuring poker nights, expert-led classes, co-working spaces, educational meetups, live events, and more. Current locations include Sarasota, Nashville, Boston, Dallas, Las Vegas, and St. Louis, with new clubs launching soon in West Palm Beach, Scottsdale, Alabama, and beyond. Not to mention Bitcoin Ben's resorts in El Salvador. There's 3 of them, and they're absolutely beautiful. You'll also get access to the first fully backed Bitcoin bank with fiat ramps and savings accounts. It's called Private Key Bank. And you guessed it, it's based out of El Salvador. Go peer-to-peer with Bitcoin bulk buys. Tap into home equity for long-term Bitcoin growth. And join their exclusive mining pools if you're interested in mining. What are you waiting for? Head over to bitcoinben.io. Join today, where Bitcoin meets freedom.
All right. All right. Anyways. Yeah. All right. So, shouts out to our boy Fernando. He's been on the show. This is his Twitter account, BTC Perception, where he kind of maps the various narratives around Bitcoin, trying to give people high signal stories and not only Bitcoin stories, but what is getting the most amount of not just engagement baiting, but like what is the conversation about? And I think this year there has been a huge, I think, misunderstanding of what are the biggest kind of headlines outside of our echo chamber and what is necessarily kind of shaping the narrative around Bitcoin. And I saw this, I was going to do this a couple of days ago. But you know, it's still in time. It's still in vogue, I guess. So BTC Perception on Twitter goes, these Bitcoin narratives captured the attention in 2025. So let's look at them. We have MicroStrategy and Saylor. I think extremely obvious, Saylor stacked an unbelievable amount of Bitcoin. I think finally getting up to like 7% of all Bitcoin supply, if I remember the numbers correctly. And then, of course, Trump at the beginning of the year. And so, look, for the audio listeners, you'll see kind of their, you could call it like a graph. It almost looks like the price action here. And I'm guessing, January here to December. And you can start to see when they were more active and how they kind of related to other stuff. Of course, Trump in the very beginning of the year was one of the biggest narratives around Bitcoin in 2025. Whether you loved him or hate him, or you thought it was good or bad, it did definitely revolve around Trump embracing Bitcoin and everything they're doing with Bitcoin and shitcoins. Now, this one's kind of interesting, mining, because from our perspective, whenever we talk about Bitcoin mining, you guys tune out. You guys don't want to see it. But from a corporate press, they love the mining stuff. And you can see it only picked up, continue to pick up until the end of the year, because I think there is a lot of interesting stuff going on with hash rate right now. And everyone's wondering, like, is this when we see the Bitcoin price start running? Then, of course, Bitcoin ETFs. Again, one of the bigger news stories throughout the year, the amount of inflows, the amount of outflows, whether they were launching ETFs, whether they didn't. It is interesting that it picked up towards the end of the year, because I think that was probably due more to, we saw a lot of outflows coming from the ETFs, though at the same time, we'll see a lot of inflows. So it's very interesting that it was more popular towards the end of the year. Personally, it felt like it was more popular during the beginning of the year. Anyways, all-time high, record high. I think you can see these spikes here exactly and know exactly when those all-time highs happen. This is I forget when is it, March? This one's obviously October. I think this one was around June. I don't even remember when Bitcoin hit all-time high before October, because it felt like it never was doing anything. But that one speaks for itself. The SEC or Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler was in the news a little bit this year. I kept trolling that he's coming out as a full Bitcoin maxi, but obviously the SEC had a very positive take on Bitcoin throughout 2025. Now, crash and plunge, it was silent all year long until the October top happened. And guess who was out there saying Bitcoin's crashing, it's plunging, it's over? I forget. Jamie Dimon, he was the one backing all this up. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Again, the beginning of the year was huge on Bitcoin reserves, strategic reserves, whether that's from the federal government, the state level, or even on the corporate level. Towards the end of the year, it completely fizzled out, which is why I kept saying, I'm like, look, we're not seeing any action coming from the U.S., though. We saw it come from the States. I think officially now we're at like 4. But that narrative just completely got nuked. Of course, BlackRock has been dominating all year long. And then we got fraud and scams. Of course, they're going to roll out the fraud and scams. So we're starting to put some of those sagas behind us, aka, the FTX stuff. Is Sam Bankman-Fried is in jail. Hopefully, I'm not going to say that, but we've seen a lot of fraud stuff around Bitcoin. The Lightning Network. Shouts out to my boy Jesse from Amboss. Dude, Lightning Network is killing it right now. The Lightning Network has really been the unsung hero of 2025. While there's been a lot of narratives, the boys building Lightning, doing the coding, the developers that are creating the Lightning products, dude, they were under the radar all year long and really, really saw some really cool stuff in Lightning that I think is really securing Lightning as the de facto way to scale Bitcoin. Now, obviously, it's not perfect, but I think if you look into some of the more recent Lightning news, I think you'd be pleasantly surprised where they were all year long. And it really goes into kind of the Bitcoin ethos of just like keep your head down and code. And yeah, they don't get that much fanfare. It doesn't get the headlines, but they built it. They built in 2025. They just shut up and built. So shouts out to everyone over building on Lightning. Shouts out to my personal friend Jestifer. He's been covering this incredible work over on the Lightning Network. Of course, 100K milestone, beginning of the year. In the middle, first part of the year, we got 100K. And then, of course, in October, when we hit 100K. Then hacks and thefts. There was a lot of hacks. There's a lot of thefts. Does obviously get the headlines, trying to scare you away. El Salvador had a little bit of action in the beginning of the year, and then quantum computing sped up towards the end of the year. Anyways, I didn't mean to go through all of it, but there is probably a stark omission here. If you're a Bitcoiner, you're like, I thought the biggest news in Bitcoin was core versus knots. Well, how about this? Surprised not to see the core knots was here, and they just retweet. Core versus knots, Bitcoin existential crisis of 2025, 91.7% contained to Bitcoin or Bitcoin Twitter /X, 8.3% everywhere else combined. Your timeline is not reality, which is one of, I think, probably a bigger message here than what was, really talked about in Bitcoin. You guys were lecturing me all year long. You're like, I'm not going to watch the show. You guys aren't covering core versus knots enough. I'm like, dude, we've covered it. We covered it like 6 times. I can't keep talking about the same stuff. Well, I can, but not in regards to core versus knots. But I think it just like that last point is the most poignant. Like, your timeline is not reality. And when you do unplug from what you see in the echo chamber, you start to realize like most people don't know what we're talking about. They don't know what matters to us. Hence why I kind of shifted tune towards the end of the year and was like, I think the biggest attack on Bitcoin is coming from Wall Street. And most people weren't really talking about that at the time. Obviously, that was when we saw the Bitcoin treasury companies struggling. We saw JP Morgan attacking Bitcoin. We saw Larry Fink being pretty bullish on Bitcoin. But I think the biggest attack, and I think I might be proven right now, entering 2026, the biggest attack on Bitcoin was from Wall Street, the institutions, whether it was, the Jane Street algorithm trading, whether it was the fudding of Bitcoin so that they could scoop up lower, whether it's incentivizing ways for you to give up your keys. I think the bigger attack was coming from Wall Street all year long. You could even argue that maybe the FUD around core versus knots was, some form of institutions trying to co-opt Bitcoin. Not going to go too deep into that, but it's very interesting when you objectively step back on the Bitcoin narratives and you start to see, what are people thinking, feeling, and talking about around Bitcoin? And some of those might have surprised you. So that's it for me today, guys. It is Friday. As you can tell, I'm not fully back yet. My voice is still messed up. I'm still kind of stuffy over here. So hopefully on Monday, I'm probably going to keep it pretty chill all weekend. Hopefully I can get over whatever this bug is. I think when I went home, it was cool. It was drier. I got off the plane in Miami. It was hot. It was humid. And then in the last couple of days down here, it got cold. So I'm still dealing with my, whatever is going on here. But anyways, enough of me. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. Let's lock in for 2026. All right. We are locking in for 2026. We are not dooming. We're not getting complacent. We're stacking. We're storing our Bitcoin in cold storage. We're continue to spread the Bitcoin propaganda because the fiat world's propaganda is in overdrive and we got to fight fire with fire. Anyways, as always, it's the weekend. Get some sun, eat some good food, hang out with your loved ones, or at the very least, call your loved ones. So those are the things that matter. And if you're getting paid today, probably stack some sats. I wouldn't be surprised if it starts ripping on us, guys. All right. Peace out, boys and girls. I will see you on Monday.
Today's episode was brought to you by BitcoinWell.com, a Bitcoin-only platform on a mission to enable financial independence.